Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. So I recently bought and restored this old record 52.5p woodworking vise. So in this video I'd like to show you how I installed it to my bench. So I started off by removing the old vise, which was an Irwin Record V175, a great vise, but I wanted something with quite a bit more clamping capacity. So I used a squeeze clamp to hold it in place while I removed the coach bolts. And with the old vise removed, I could start on installing the new vise. So I have a scrap piece of pine here. I need to add this to the bench to bring the new vise up to the required height. So I'm just making some marks here, and then I could cut this piece out on the bench hook with a handsaw. Then I made some marks as I want to add some screws here. So I need some pilot holes. I used an awl to mark the areas where I want to drill. One in each corner and one in the center. And then I could drill out the holes on the drill press. Then I used a countersink just to countersink the holes to make the screw heads nice and flush. I could then add the screws and then flip the piece over to add some wood glue. Now to add this to the bottom of the bench, just making sure it's square with the front, and again I can use a squeeze clamp to keep it in position while I drive in the screws. I needed to add more depth to the bench because this new vise has more depth to it than the old one did. So now I need to mark where I need to drill out some pilot holes to attach the vise, but also I need to make some marks here because the backs of the screws which will hold on the back jaw need to be recessed so that they don't hit the bench, and you'll see that in a moment how that works. I used a countersink bit just to recess those points, and the heads of the screws will sit inside that later on. Just like that. Then I drilled out the pilot holes required for some large coach bolts, which is going to be needed here to attach the vise to the bench. For the jaws, I have this old scrap of what I think is oak, and it's 11mm high, 25mm wide and 2mm thick. This should be ideal for jaws, nice and long lasting. So I cut out the pieces on the table saw. And then marked up and finished off the cuts on the miter saw. And once the first jaw was cut, I could use that as a template to cut the second jaw. So now for adding the jaws, I like to add a ruler underneath the jaw, and that just lifts it off the rails at the bottom a fraction. Then with a combination square I can make sure everything's centered, add a few clamps to hold it in place, and then drill some pilot holes. To attach these jaws, I'm going to use these small coach screws. And these bite into that hardwood nicely. Now to attach the voice to the bench, I've got these large coach bolts which I'll be using. I just needed to get them added and started off with a wrench. I did this by hand because I didn't want to over tighten anything. Now I wanted to oil the rails before I add this front piece in. So I've got a rag soaked in oil in a can there. This will prevent further rust and make them slide nicely. Now for the screw, I want to add some grease to the screw so that it's nice and smooth. And I've got an old brush there to apply it into all of those grooves. Now I could add this piece which I previously restored along with the rest of the vise and add the screw. Now I could get the front jaw in, lined up nicely, and add pilot holes again. It's nicely clamped, nice and tight so it can't move. And then I could add the two little coach screws at the front. So I made the jaws oversized so that I could plane them back to make them flush with the tabletop. So here I'm just adding a bit of candle wax to the sole of the hand plane to make it run nice and smooth. And then I just took my time and started to remove the material. And I'm running the back of the plane there just along the surface of the bench as a reference, taking off nice fine shavings until it's nice and flush. Then I took some sandpaper, wrapped around a block of wood just to ease over all of the edges, and then for the finish I added some boiled linseed oil. Finally, I needed to add a split pin at the end of the screw, as I removed this originally when I restored the vise, so the metal end cap could go back on. And then the two washers, and finally the split pin. And I just needed to bend this over to lock it into place. And that was the installation complete, and as you can see, the vise opens nice and smoothly, and it has a capacity of around 30 centimeters or around 1 foot when fully opened.
and that allows me to clamp really big work pieces like this old scrap piece of 2x8.
Okay, so that is about it for this video then. So that is how I installed this vintage record 52.5p vice to my workbench. Of course there are different ways you could do it. I could have used bolts and bolted it to the bench, but I didn't want to have the recessed holes in the top of the bench where you can see the bolts. I wanted to keep it all smooth, so I went with coach bolts. I would say probably bolts, standard bolts are better, but I think this will be nice and solid. I don't have any worries about it. The coach bolts are nice and long and secure, and I think it turned out okay in the end. Nice vice with plenty of capacity. Why not get yourself an old vintage vice and restore it? It's quite good fun to see how it goes from being beaten up and rusty to looking almost like new again. So if you did find this video useful, please remember to like and also consider subscribing for more DIY related videos. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.